All right, welcome back to Always Adaptive. My name is Randall James. I'm a strength and a running coach with 11 years of experience. And today we are talking about a mini debate that happened between political commentator Tim Pool and lead vocalist for the band All That Remains, a good band, by the way, Phil Labonte, on a recent episode of Timcast IRL. After a caller asks a question about calories, Tim begins getting very passionate about how he believes calories in versus calories out isn't a good model for obese people to use. Being an evidence-based coach that has helped many people not only lose weight, but gain weight and improve performance using calories, I felt qualified to weigh in here. I'm going to do my best to represent what I think Tim is trying to say here. It ended up coming out sort of wonky at points, but as the conversation went on, it became sort of clear what he meant by some of the stuff he was trying to say. But without further ado, let's get into the video. So Phil gets a question. Let's play that and listen in on what Tim has to say after that.
Micah Johnson says, Phil, regarding 2 weeks ago, I feel like if people gain weight while in a deficit, they should stop dieting and start powering the grid. They've broken thermodynamics. Keep up the good work, guys.
I think he's talking about calories in versus calories out.
The issue is I really can't stand the overly simplistic, like Neil deGrasse Tyson.
It's true.
It's just calories in, calories out. That's all that matters. No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
If you are eating literally nothing but carbohydrates then and not protein, you are going to imbalance your system. Your system is not going to be able to output energy, and it's going to accumulate. So you will just get fat while being depressed and slovenly and lazy and be like, I don't understand why everything hurts all the time.
Tim says he can't stand the oversimplistic Neil deGrasse Tyson, it's just calories in, calories out comments. What Tim is saying is technically wrong, but the idea he is conveying is actually very helpful. I made a post a few months ago that said, I agree with the statement, if someone gains weight, they are not in a calorie deficit. However, if all you have to say to people is it really is just as simple as calories in versus calories out, then you are naive and have clearly never worked with people. Basically, what I'm saying in that post is that when you work with people, it becomes very apparent very quickly that you have to get creative. And if you just run around saying it's just calories, eventually someone's going to take that as you calling them a liar. And a lot of the time they are not lying. They just don't know the ins and outs of calories, what portion sizes actually look like, or they think of it as the additive energy balance model. The constrained energy balance model is a more accurate depiction of what actually happens. The more movement you partake in, the more of a compensatory effect there will be downstream. If I run 12 miles on Sunday, for example, and my nutrition is not representative of what it should be, my body will compensate by moving less. I may fidget less, get up off the couch less, I may speak less. So to just say simply, it's how much you eat and how much you move is really not the end of it. This is also where I'm concerned about the young science-based or evidence-based lifters that are currently in or fresh out of college. These people are like robots, just chanting calories in, calories out, that is all it is. And there's a difference between knowing something and understanding something. If all you have to say to your people is calories in versus calories out, then you're not going to make very much change in this world. So I know what Tim is saying here, but then he says,
so this argument where it's like, just calories in, calories out, and you'll lose weight. Not correct.
Yes, it is.
It's not correct.
It's absolutely correct.
It's completely false.
It's not correct, it's completely false. You can't say it's technically true, but then say it's not correct, it's completely false. He's going to move the goalpost later, but let's zoom in on just the use of absolute language. I really wish he would say something at the beginning of this like, it's not incorrect, it's more complicated. I would 1000% be on his side if he started with that. Instead, he started with an extreme absolute and slowly moved as the argument progressed.
1,000, if you are out there burning 2,000 calories
How do you burn
a day,
2,000 calories if you don't have protein to move your muscles?
If you're burning 2,000 calories a day and you're only taking in 1,000 calories, you are going to lose weight. You will burn your muscles away, yes, but you will lose weight.
So number one, protein turnover doesn't just happen that fast. Just because you don't have protein doesn't mean you can't move your muscles and that your muscles are just going to disappear. Not to mention, Americans eat quite a bit of protein. It's not the optimal amount, but it's not low. More on that in a bit, though.
So the problem with this is it is one of these technically correct statements that doesn't help anybody actually lose weight. So that's what's the really annoying thing about Neil deGrasse Tyson saying all that matters is calories in, calories out, and you'll lose weight. Do people want to burn off their muscle and be fat with no ability to move their skeleton? No. Do they want to be sickly and diabetic? No. They want to be fit with good muscle mass and feel energized and not be depressed. And that is not calories in, calories out.
Tim says it's one of these technically correct statements that doesn't actually help people lose weight. Now, again, I can relate with Tim's message here that it's technically correct but doesn't actually help people. I would change that to doesn't always help people. First of all, Tim's stance makes the presupposition that when coaches and dietitians tell people to cut back their calories, that they just say eat very little protein and all carbs. I don't know anyone who makes that recommendation. And so to be fair to Tim, I'm just going to assume that he means if a friend or someone else that is not really a professional tells an obese person to just eat less food without any guidance on what that macronutrient split should look like. Now, to his point of how would you burn 2,000 calories if you don't have protein to move your muscles, what he's trying to say there is that if someone reduces their calories and that ends up being protein that they took away, then they won't have enough protein when they go into a caloric deficit, and they will lose their muscle. I'm pulling from later parts in the debate here to make this assumption because, again, he does move his position around a little bit. But there is another presupposition here. He assumes that the American diet is low in fat and protein. It's not in the way where his assumption would hold true. Data from the CDC National Center for Health Statistics shows that the percentage of calories for the average U.S. adult is around 47% carbs, 36% fat, and 16% protein. 16% is 100 grams of protein. While that is not enough to build a meaningful amount of muscle, unless they're a smaller person, for most people that are not trying to be bodybuilders, it's enough to stave off sarcopenia for a very long time. Yes, they will lose a little bit of muscle, but not so much that they won't be able to use their muscles. This is just a silly idea. I want to double click on that 36% fat point though, because that same data is showing a trend that carbs are on the fall while fat and protein are on the rise. I made a video about what the true culprit of the obesity epidemic is. It was a response to Jordan Peterson and Dr. Benjamin Bickman's interview where they basically demonized carbs for an hour straight. You can watch that here. And in it, I spoke about the fact that the culprit is not carbs by themselves. It is the combination of carbs and fats in highly palatable, ultra-processed foods that are designed to hit the dopamine centers of your brain hard. Take this donut stick, for example. If you've seen me do this before, bear with me. You probably know why this is an important example here. When you look at this donut stick, what comes to mind? If you thought about carbohydrates, you'd be right in line with most people. They look at this and they think carbs or sugar. But if we take a closer look at it, there are 16 grams of fat, 29 grams of carbs, and 2 grams of protein. So far, so good. More grams of carbs versus fat. But when we take into account the fact that 1 gram of carbs is 4 calories, while 1 gram of fat is 9 calories, this paints a much different picture. The percentage of calories from carbohydrates is 43%. The percentage of calories from fat is, drumroll please, 54%, over 10 percentage points higher for fat than carbs. So it's actually fat that is making processed foods like this hypercaloric. This tiny little stick has 270 calories. That is terrible. Now remember this point because Tim is going to unintentionally come up with examples on the spot, which will back up this very thing.
Nice butt, you have to lift.
The point is, if there is someone who is obese and you tell them calories in, calories out is all that matters, do you think they will lose weight?
The answer is it fully depends on the individual. Some people are straight up data junkies. They love tracking stuff and seeing the micro details and differences each week. For other people, that's their worst enemy. Most people just don't know how to track. They don't do well with amounts. In studies looking at people trying to estimate their food intake and energy expenditure, they're always off. They overestimate movement and they underestimate food. Take this study, for example, titled Underreporting of Energy Intake in Weight Loss Maintainers. Researchers measured people's actual total daily energy expenditure using doubly labeled water, which is basically the gold standard for tracking calories burned in real life. When they compared that to what people said they ate, every single group underreported. Weight loss maintainers were off by about 605 calories a day, and normal weight controls were off by about 308 calories. That's a 25% underestimation in the maintainers compared to the 14% in the controls. So if you just tell someone calories in, calories out, but they don't know how to accurately measure either side of that equation, then they can be off by hundreds of calories a day without realizing it. The principle still works, but without accuracy in the inputs, the outputs don't match reality. A serving size of walnuts is a good example of this. People love saying nuts are a good snack, but they actually aren't. They're very high calorie. A serving of walnuts is 7 whole nuts. I don't know about you, but when I eat nuts, I'm not just eating 7 nuts. I'm smashing maybe 30, but when someone is told nuts are a good snack and they go and eat 25 whole walnuts, which is pretty realistic, they're looking at 660 calories.
If they're obese, they most likely will not just simply lose weight because they have multiple problems. But if you're talking about how to lose weight,
what kind of weight?
The amount, what?
What kind of weight?
Well, I mean, that's a totally different topic.
So here's the issue. Nobody who's saying I want to lose weight means I want to shave off muscle mass.
So again, Tim, you're supposing that they're just eliminating protein, and that's just not the case. You're also way overestimating how much muscle they would lose on a lower protein diet. It's important, but they're not going to wither down and float away in a puff of powder. I'm being hyperbolic, but I think you all understand.
This is the problem I have with people going, you want to lose weight? Calories in, calories out. No, there is a person who's fat. They're eating 700 carbs per day and 13 grams of protein, and they're getting like 50 grams of fat, and they're going like, I'm only eating 2,000 calories a day, but I'm gaining weight like crazy.
I've already shown that these numbers are way off what the typical American eats. No one is eating 700 grams of carbs, and those of us that are required to eat carbs in order to maintain our muscle mass, strength, and speed know this. It's hard enough to eat 400 grams of carbs, especially in the form of rice and potatoes. You got to get creative. I've used this example before, but you're not just going to eat too much plain potato. It's when you add butter and cheese that it becomes much more tasty, and those are both fat.
You need to cut the carbs down, increase the protein and fat. I can eat thousands of calories in meat and fats and not put on weight.
You don't know you can do that unless you tracked your food while you were doing that. Fat and meat isn't magical. Keto and carnivore diets are not magical. Let me give you a recent anecdote. My client is a type 2 diabetic. He's tried a lot of different things to bring his glucose down. He's never tried the carnivore or keto diets. Now, just to be clear, I did not recommend for him to do this, but he wanted to try it. So he did. And in 1 week, his weight shot up by about 5 pounds, and both his glucose and blood pressure shot up by about 10 points. So it's not always good, Tim.
If you were to eat 3,000 calories a day in meats and fat and only burn 1,500, you will put on both muscle and fat.
Agreed. And if you eat 3,000 calories of carbs with no protein, you're going to gain massive fat.
But Tim, no one does this. I've already shown you the macro split for the average American. In fact, those of us that are really in shape probably eat more carbs than the average American. I eat 350 to 500 grams of carbs daily.
Here's the point I'm making. If a person who does not exercise is consuming calories in appropriate numbers of carbs, proteins, and fats, they will put on muscle whether they try to or not. Men naturally do, especially young men because of testosterone. It's a fact.
So children, while developing, will build muscle, yes. But a 30-year-old isn't just going to build muscle because they increase their protein and fat. There has to be a weight training stimulus. So unless they want to, they will not build muscle. It's false to say they will put on muscle whether they want to or not.
If you're an overweight person, and the first steps that you have to take are to reduce your calories if you actually want to lose weight.
Every single time this conversation comes up, or I should say, not to be hyperbolic, 80% of the time, people tell me like, you know what, man, I was cutting down calories, but I wasn't losing weight and I couldn't figure it out. And I'm like, were you exercising? And they're like, I was trying, man. It was just hard. I wake up feeling sick.
So you've just admitted that they said no. They failed at exercising, which means they weren't burning as many calories. Carbs aren't going to make someone feel sick. Carbs can actually make you feel better because it reduces cortisol. Glucose and cortisol are intimately connected. Look it up. But people make up all kinds of stories to prevent the onus from being on them, preventing them from understanding that they are just lazy. When you first start working out, it is hard and it doesn't feel good. You have to push through that period. Eventually, you stop being sore, you start to feel more energy, and you watch yourself grow stronger so that the motivation is there. But it takes time. Now, I will say to Phil's point, yes, they have to reduce their calories. But what I think Tim is getting at is just saying, hey, you need to reduce your calories doesn't work for some people. And I agree with this. I tend to focus on habit-based coaching with a lot of people unless, like I said earlier, they're data junkies that love tracking that type of stuff. It's still intended to get them to lose weight by eating less calories. They just don't know that. Things like hand portions for food, mindful eating, drinking more water, eating more fiber, things of that nature.
And it's like, I had a friend who was morbidly obese when he was a kid, and he couldn't figure it out. And I'm like, bro, for breakfast, you had a bowl of Frosted Flakes. For lunch, you had a bowl of macaroni and cheese, and for dinner, you had you had some sandwiches, you had some peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. You ate nothing but carbs. Your body can't function without the fat and protein to operate. So you're just getting sick.
Okay, so let's do the macro split on everything Tim just said. I'll break it down food by food, then give you the total calories and the macro split at the end. I'll use average USDA values and typical serving sizes for each. So for Frosted Flakes, obviously you're not just going to eat the cereal by itself. Frosted Flakes would be terrible by themselves. You're going to use milk. So we're going to use whole milk for this. So total, we have 290 calories. It's 8 grams of fat, 46 grams of carbs, and 9 grams of protein. Then he says macaroni and cheese. We're going to assume 1 cup prepared. So that's 12 grams of fat, 45 grams of carbs, and 10 grams of protein. It's about 310 calories. And then ham and cheese sandwich. Now, he said sandwiches, and most people put mayo and cheese, obviously, unless you're just eating plain ham sandwich. That sounds terrible. I don't think I've ever eaten that. So if we assume that it's 2 sandwiches and there's mayo and cheese on it, let's see here. We're at 38 grams of fat, 64 grams of carbs, and 38 grams of protein for a grand total of 768 calories. So that whole thing together is 1,368 calories, 58 grams of fat, 155 grams of carbs, and 57 grams of protein. Now, if we double that, because the average person isn't just eating 1,300 calories, we end up with 2,736 calories, 116 grams of fat, 310 grams of carbs, and 114 grams of protein. This would actually be a decent macro split for a 150-pound active person. If we use the equation of 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight, then we end up with 120 grams of protein. That's not bad. You'd be pretty close with these 3 meals. The reason why I use this equation for most people is that the gram of protein per pound of body weight number is for people that are trying to be bodybuilders. And it also assumes that they're relatively lean. Most people aren't, and they have a high percentage of body fat. Your body fat doesn't need protein, so you reduce the starting grammage.
Would you hire a personal trainer who says, doesn't matter what you eat, just eat carbs, but don't eat too many?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't hire a personal trainer in the first place. But
no, that's not my question. Would you would you go to a gym where the guy says, you walk in and say, I'm trying to lose weight? Would you hire a guy who says, it doesn't matter what you eat, just eat a bunch of carbs as long as you eat 1,900 calories of carbs?
I think maybe Tim had some sort of bad experience working with a trainer, because we will not say that to people. And if they did say that to Tim, they're not a very good trainer. So usually when someone approaches me, after a goal and a time frame are discussed, calories would be calculated right at the beginning. So let me walk you through this step by step. There are many different equations you can use online, but using the Mifflin-St. Jean equation, my BMR is 1,811 calories. Now, step 2 is to apply a multiplier based on activity level. I'm on my feet a lot, and I train every single day. So I would use an extra active multiplier, 1.9. That leaves me with an estimate of 3,442 calories. Now, on the days like last weekend where I ran 12 miles, that run alone, I burned 1,500 calories in an hour and 45-minute period. So on that day, I increased my food intake to compensate so that I don't lose my precious muscle. Next up is protein. I always start with the protein equation I outlined earlier, 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight. I weigh 188 pounds, so that equates to roughly 150 grams of protein. Now, I'm pretty lean, so instead, I might use 1 gram per pound of lean body mass. There are those that say that you need a gram per pound of body weight in general, but remember, I don't want to get any bigger. That's not my goal. My goal is to maintain what I have. That includes my body fat percentage, by the way. And I'm also trying to focus on my running. I'm 13% body fat, so I would subtract that from my total body weight, which brings me down to 164. So that gets me up to 164 grams of protein. That's taking up roughly 20% of my total calories. The remaining percentage of calories is divided up based on the goal. I'm a runner, so I need more carbs. So that would put my carb percentage higher than the average person. I'll usually be around 55% of calories from carbs, which is around 473 grams of carbs. Now, I'm not going to be anal about this. The real times I'm super focused on it are, again, the days where I run 10 plus miles. Now, that leaves me with 25% of my calories coming from fat, which would be around 96 grams of fat. Now, that is a lot of carbs. The average American doesn't eat like this. And that's why this is pretty telling. You know who does eat like this? People with great physiques. Go speak with bodybuilders. They would sooner cut fat and increase carbs than the opposite. Carbs are great for muscle and power. They fuel your strength, your brain, and if you don't eat enough of them, then hard training can affect your mental capacity. You'll feel weaker, you won't sleep as well. There are many downstream side effects of it.
The average person who wants to lose weight is trying to burn fat. It does not help them to say calories in, calories out, have a nice day.
It does more than saying, oh, just eat whatever you feel like and don't burn any.
Or you can just say, cut the carbs out, eat more protein. You'll feel better.
You don't know that.
Start going for walks.
You don't know that because if they cut the carbs out and eat more protein, that doesn't mean that they're going to be in a caloric deficit.
Bill is right here. You can't guarantee that they will be in a deficit. People gain weight on the carnivore diets and such all the time, especially if the protein they're eating is in the form of ribeyes and shit. Fat intake pumps up calories very quickly, like I've already discussed. 9 calories per gram adds up really fast.
So the average young guy who eats nothing but protein will put on a lot of muscle because testosterone naturally will develop muscle.
If he's lifting,
you don't have to be lifting. Men naturally will put on muscle. There is, of course, there's an increase in muscle mass you get from lifting, and you should be lifting, but men naturally will put on muscle through testosterone. This happens through development. At a certain point, you go through sarcopenia, your muscle starts breaking down unless you're exercising.
But that last point about sarcopenia, yeah, that's the point. So then you have to be lifting, Tim. You just debunked your own point about not needing to lift weights. If they are in a surplus, yes, they will gain a little bit of muscle up to a certain point. If they don't eat and train hard enough, they will not gain that much. Once again, younger developing males will build muscle. 30-year-olds will not.
But young guys with proper fat will produce testosterone.
The body can turn excess protein into fat.
Indeed, it can, but that's through work. If you're eating nothing, yes, it's a gluconeogenesis. It is difficult for the body to do.
So he might be referring to how protein can be turned into carbs via gluconeogenesis, and then carbs turn into fat via de novo lipogenesis. But protein does not turn into fat via gluconeogenesis. That is a process to create glucose from fat or protein. But Tim did sort of stick the landing here. This is where he starts to move his position a little bit. I think he could tell that he was starting to get into some water that was a little deep for his understanding.
In shape runs are hard and painful. So, I mean, like, I understand what you're saying, that nutrients is important, but at the end of the day, if you're getting proper nutrients and you're not in a caloric deficit, you won't lose weight.
So the point is, obviously you need a caloric deficit, but telling someone who has excess fat they can eat anything and they will lose weight in deficit is wrong.
So it's not wrong. It's just not helpful in all contexts. I understand what you're trying to say, Tim. You're saying telling them to eat less food without macronutrient guidance isn't helpful. But then you said it's a fact and you totally lost me.
I mean,
it's factually wrong. It's it's not independent. So it's just factually wrong. You cannot function to lose the weight if you're malnourished.
If I ate nothing but carbs and very little protein for 6 months and was in a calorie deficit, I would lose weight. Yes, I may lose a little bit of muscle, but it's not as fast of a process as you think it is, especially for obese people. Most coaches will try and keep their people at about 1.5 to 2 pounds of weight loss a week so that they don't lose much muscle. But I and others know that if someone is really obese, they can get away with more, 3 to 5 pounds a week. It depends on how much you have to give. But in my case, it's not like I would be some sick person dying because I'm eating nothing but carbs with a low protein and fat diet. That is not sustainable, but also no one is giving that advice. And also no one is eating like that. Let's look at some more data. The Samoas, some of the largest and fattest people on the planet. This study titled Dietary Intake of Modernizing Samoans, Implications for Risk of Cardiovascular Disease is the perfect example. When you look at the numbers here, both groups of Samoans, American and Western, are running very high on fat intake. American Samoans are at 36% fat, while Western Samoans are at a massive 46%. And remember, these aren't keto dieters. Carbs are still 44 to 47% of their calories. That's the classic high carb, high fat formula that you see in ultra processed junk foods, like that little Debbie donut stick I was talking about earlier. It's not just too many carbs or too much fat in isolation. It's the combination that hijacks appetite, drives up overconsumption, and leaves you in a constant calorie surplus.
Of Nutrigrain.
Usually, well, I mean, it's because they're eating bad food, but also because of the sedentary lifestyle. Like if you're eating bad food and sitting around, then you're going to put on a lot of weight.
And can you reverse a sedentary lifestyle if you're not getting proper protein and fat?
I mean, you can start to, yeah. By just getting up and moving around, yes.
Largely, no. Your muscles can operate without protein?
This is an appeal to the extreme or worst case scenario straw man. You use literally the most unrealistic example of the thing to try and make your point. As I said earlier, over time, you may lose some muscle, but it won't be so much that you can't operate your muscles. That doesn't make any sense.
There's a difference between calories from carbs and protein and fat.
Marginally, yes.
Not marginally. With no fat is used to produce hormones in your body. Protein is used to produce muscle. Carbohydrates are used by the cells to produce to power the cells with glucose, the mitochondria. So if you're eating nothing but carbs, you're producing excess glucose.
While yes, fats are a building block of hormones, carbs are also important in the creation of them. When your blood sugar rises, your body releases insulin. And that's not just about controlling glucose. Insulin also flips on a muscle building pathway through mTOR. It helps store glycogen and supports other anabolic processes. Adequate carbs play a massive role in keeping your thyroid humming too, because they help maintain active T3 levels, while chronically low carb diets can slow that conversion and drag down your metabolism. Carbs also influence leptin, the hormone your fat cells use to signal energy sufficiency to your brain, and higher carb availability can keep those signals strong. On the flip side, when carbs are too low for too long, cortisol often rises because your body starts breaking down amino acids to make glucose just to keep blood sugar stable. That's the process he referred to earlier, gluconeogenesis.
I have with Neil deGrasse Tyson, because then people are like, I had a bowl of Frosted Flakes, but it was a small bowl, and I still feel sick. How is it so easy for you guys to skate? I've dealt with this my whole life. I'm like, bro, you had a bowl of macaroni and cheese for breakfast. I had a steak. I feel like $1 million.
Honestly, this would be a different scenario if Tim had some sort of great physique to speak about. He doesn't, though. Whatever he's doing isn't working for him either. He's not just putting on a bunch of muscle because of the protein and fat he's eating. I eat cereal all the time. Strawberry banana Cheerios are my jam. Also, someone who eats a low amount of fat will still build muscle, as evidenced by the bodybuilders who choose to have that style of macro split. Fat is usually the one to take the hit, especially the closer they get to shows, as fat is already in its storage form. It's way higher calories per gram at 9 calories once again, which makes it easier to go into surplus. And carbs fill the muscle with glycogen, which is glucose and water, which makes the athlete look fuller. But my closing thoughts are this. I think Tim means well, and his point is well taken that just speaking SICO in all situations is not helpful and can lead to the people you're talking to feeling like you're calling them a liar or that they're not working hard enough, when the reality is they just don't know how to do it in most cases, and they are actually working incredibly hard. I think Tim misses the mark where he starts to say things like factually wrong. Just the use of absolute language really irritates me. I think it would do Tim a lot of good to speak to more athletes and bodybuilders to understand just how important carbs are for building muscle and performing well. I also wish he could speak with some of my clients. In all my 11 years of doing this, I've never recommended a single keto or carnivore style diet. All the people that have lost weight with me or built muscle did so on a moderate amount of carbohydrates. Again, I think Tim has been slighted by someone in the past, which sucks because there are trainers out there that give the rest of us a bad name, and then we're stuck picking up the pieces trying to convince them that there are good coaches out there. We exist. We're just rare, and that's good, honestly. Not everyone should be a trainer. This is a very hard business. 90% of trainers quit after their first year. It's not a glorifying profession. It's a lot of work, a lot of emotions, personal development, learning how to speak effectively to people and understand how they're feeling about things, learning how to lead them to their own conclusions and make them feel like it was their idea from the start. It's a very skillful profession. If you're going to be good, you have to care about people and what they think and say. You can't just pretend, oh, I know better, this person's an idiot. But anyways, maybe that's a topic for another video. Should you be a personal trainer? That might do well. I don't know. But that's it for me. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. I appreciate you sticking it out all the way to the end. I've been straying away from reaction content, but recently here there have been some people saying some outlandish stuff, and so I felt the need to weigh in. But once again, my name is Randall James, and this is Always Adaptive, a business born from the idea that you are always adapting. Literally, right this moment, whether you're sitting or you're standing, that is an input. You're adapting to that. The food you eat, how you spend your free time, all inputs. So control your inputs and you can control your life. I'll see you at the next one. Stay adaptive.